Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for watching. We got a fun show for you today. What I'm going to do is compare this Gibson SG. This is more or less a 61 style, and I'm going to compare it with the Les Paul that's hanging on the wall. That's also a Gibson, but it's a 50s style Les Paul. So they're very similar guitars in some ways, and yet very different in other ways. So let's take a look. We'll start with the headstock. And we see it's got the Gibson open book, of course, and the Gibson mother of pearl logo. Really well done. And the SG has this extra little inlay in the middle. Let's check out Les Paul. Okay, so there's the Les Paul. We see it's very similar, open book, and it has the Gibson logo in mother of pearl. However, it has the Les Paul signature silkscreen, which looks really good. That's just a cool design. We see here the truss rod cover is the same, but it says standard on it. Okay, looking at the back, we see they're using Kluson Deluxe style tuners. I believe they're Gibson branded. And it's a one-piece solid mahogany neck and headstock. There's no scarf joint. Let's check out the SG. And there's the SG. Using the same style tuners, Kluson Deluxe. It's a one-piece solid mahogany neck and headstock with no scarf joint. So far, very similar. Now let's take a look. We see they've got nice aged binding with fret end nibs, or fret end binding as they call it. And it's on a rosewood fingerboard with mother of pearl or fake mother of pearl inlays. All in all, looks fantastic and feels great. Let's check out Les Paul. And there's the Les Paul. We see it's the same great binding job with the fret end nibs on a rosewood fingerboard with mother of pearl or fake mother of pearl trapezoid inlays. So far, these guitars are very similar. Now they start to vary a little bit because this is the 50s style. I notice it's a bit deeper of a C carve on the neck profile. I also notice as I work my way up, things are starting to change on these guitars. They are different. Look at this neck heel. That's a fairly big piece of wood, and it butts into what is a very substantial piece of the body there. Let's check out the SG. Okay, so here's the SG, and I notice, first of all, the neck heel is much further down the neck. This neck joins the body at the 22nd fret, whereas the Les Paul joins on the 16th fret. That's a big difference. And look at how small this body is where it joins. I mean, it's still a great joint, but look at that. It's about half as thick. Now that's a big deal. That really changes the way you play, especially the location of where the body joins. On an SG, when you're playing it, it feels like the whole neck is completely exposed and accessible. That's pretty cool. Now, since we got the SG, let's take a look at the hardware. I see they're using a stop tailpiece with a Tune-O-Matic style bridge. That's a good setup. It gives you access to setting intonation separately on each string, which is technically great. Let's check out Les Paul. Okay, and there's the Les Paul. Same stop tailpiece and Tune-O-Matic bridge. So that is good news. Now I see here the Les Paul has 2 humbucker pickups and a 3-position switch. No surprise to anybody there. Let's check out the SG. And there we see the SG has the same style pickups, both humbuckers, and the same 3-position switch. Now the switch has been moved from up here on the Les Paul down here to by the knobs. This keeps you from hitting the switch by mistake when you're strumming, and it also makes for a tidier little wiring job. Now the SG has 2 volume and 2 tone controls, each one controlling its pickup separately. And let's check out the Les Paul. Okay, there we see the Les Paul has 2 volume and 2 tone, just like the SG, and each one controls its own pickup just the same. Now the output jack is on the side of the Les Paul, so there's a little more routing going on for a Les Paul. While we're at the back here, I noticed the Les Paul is a fairly flat, solid piece of mahogany, barely beveled on the edges, more or less just rounded off a little bit. Let's take a look at the SG. Okay, there's the SG, and we see it's also a solid piece of mahogany, but it has much more substantial beveling on the edges for comfort and a bit of style. Now, speaking of style, I do notice the SG is much more like a piece of plywood. It's not plywood, don't get me wrong, it's a great quality guitar, but compared to the Les Paul, this feels like just a plank of wood, something that you might be able to assemble in your garage, whereas the Les Paul, well, let's take a look. Yeah, a closer inspection shows us on the Les Paul, it has a maple cap on top of the mahogany slab, and this is arched or carved to give a really cool vintage look. That would be much harder to do than the flat SG. Some people will say that maple cap adds a bit of a bright tone to your notes. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I guess I do hear it a little bit. I will say, in playing the SG as compared to the Les Paul, the SG to me feels like it has a bit more bite, a little high-end crunch to it, whereas the Les Paul has a bit more punch in the gut, deep, ballsy notes. Neither guitar is lacking in any way. They're just a little different. The Gibson Les Pauls that I've had seem to have higher action than the SG, and I'm not sure if they're set up like that from the factory or if it's a coincidence, but it certainly rings true in this case. The action on this Les Paul is much higher than the SG. Let's take a look. And there's the SG, much lower. I mean, it's noticeable from 1.5 feet away. Okay, so there we go. 2 styles or designs of guitar that have stood the test of time, and we can't argue with that. I personally prefer the looks of a Les Paul and the sounds, but I do find an SG just seems a little better for playing. It's more comfortable and better fret access. Anyway, is what it is. Let's take a listen. And if you're looking at some of these guitars, congratulations, they are great. I am fortunate to have these on loan today. Thanks for watching. Cheers.